Emily, a tycoon, secretly loved his friend's bride-to-be. She is brutally abandoned at the altar. Her family forces her to marry the groom's brother, Lucas, to avoid scandal. At the altar, Arthur, the best man, sees her pain and sacrifice. In the moment of vows, he interrupts the ceremony and declares, "Stop, this isn't fair. Helena, I love you, I always have. Marry me." Prepare for a twist where a secret love is revealed amidst a scandal. But passion and loyalty can heal broken hearts and prove that the truest love arises in the ruins. Watch this story to the end. You will be surprised by this story. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. Every day we post videos like this. Continuing. Sarah Walker adjusted the delicate veil of her sister Emily for the third time that morning, her hands trembling slightly as she watched her sister's reflection in the ornate mirror of the bridal suite. St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City was filled with white flowers and distinguished guests, all waiting to witness the wedding of the year between Emily Walker and Lucas Montgomery. "You look beautiful, Em," Sarah murmured, forcing a smile as she smoothed the pleats of the French lace dress that cost more than she earned in 6 months working as a freelance translator. Emily twirled in front of the mirror, her blue eyes sparkling with excitement. At 24, she had always been the star of the family, beautiful, outgoing, and magnetic. Sarah, 4 years older, had always been content to remain in the shadows, taking care of the details that made everyone's lives run perfectly. "Sarah, did you bring the rings?" asked Mrs. Walker, the mother of the two, bursting into the room with her habitual urgency. Dressed in navy blue, she exuded tension, masked by an artificial smile. "The wedding needs to be perfect. The Montgomery family is very influential and we can't afford to—" "Everything is under control, Mom," Sarah interrupted gently, showing the small velvet box. "The flowers are in place, the photographer has arrived, and I confirmed with Father Michael an hour ago." On the groom's side of the church, Ethan Caldwell adjusted Lucas Montgomery's tie, watching his friend with poorly disguised concern. At 38, Ethan commanded an investment empire that moved billions. But at that moment, his business intuition alerted him to something he couldn't name. "Are you sure about this, Lucas?" he asked, his deep voice echoing in the small office attached to the sacristy. "Marriage isn't a corporate merger. Once you say I do, there's no turning back." Lucas, a 32-year-old man with the superficial charm typical of someone born with a silver spoon in his mouth, laughed nervously. "Ethan, you're being too dramatic. Emily is perfect, beautiful, from a good family, and she'll look great in the society pages." Ethan frowned. In all the years of friendship since their college days, he had rarely heard Lucas talk about real love. But keeping his opinions to himself was one of the characteristics that had made him a successful businessman. Meanwhile, Sarah walked through the corridors of the church, checking every detail one last time. That's when she saw her, a blonde, elegant woman, whispering something urgent in Emily's ear. Her sister's face paled instantly. "Em, what is it?" Sarah approached, her heart racing as she noticed the panic in the bride's eyes. I can't," Emily whispered, her hands trembling. "Isabella just told me. Lucas, he was with another woman last night at the hotel. She has pictures." Sarah's world crumbled. All the months of planning, the family's financial sacrifices, the guests waiting outside, everything collapsing in a matter of seconds. "Emily, breathe." Sarah held her sister's shoulders. "Maybe it's a misunderstanding or someone trying to cause trouble." "It's not a lie!" Emily burst out, tears spraying over her veil. "I always knew he didn't really love me, but I thought that with time... Sarah, I can't marry him knowing this." Mrs. Walker burst into the room at that moment, followed by the girl's father, Mr. Walker, a simple man who had worked all his life as an accountant to provide for these nuptials. "What's going on here?" Mrs. Walker looked between her daughters, immediately noticing Emily's tears. "Why aren't you heading to the altar?" "Mom, I can't get married," Emily sobbed. "Lucas cheated on me. I can't." The silence that followed was deafening. Mr. Walker paled, mentally calculating the costs of the wedding they had undertaken, the money borrowed, the debts that would take years to pay off. "This is impossible," Mrs. Walker whispered, but Sarah could see the despair growing in her mother's eyes. "Emily, it's just wedding jitters. All couples have problems, but I won't." Emily stood up abruptly, starting to take off her veil. "You can hate me, you can disinherit me, but I will not marry a man who cheats on me even before the wedding." It was in this moment of absolute chaos that Sarah heard the urgent knocking on the door. The voice of the ceremony organizer echoed from outside. "Mrs. Walker, the guests are asking about the delay. The groom is already at the altar." Sarah looked at her shattered family around her, at Emily's shattered dreams, at the financial despair that would befall them, and a terrible idea began to form in her mind. "Sarah, no," Emily whispered when she realized what her sister was thinking. "I know what you're thinking, and I won't let—" "Someone needs to go to that altar," Mrs. Walker interrupted, her brittle voice revealing the panic. "We have 200 guests out there, the social press, the Montgomerys. If we cancel now, our family will never recover from the humiliation." "I will," Sarah said simply, her words falling like stones in the tense silence of the room. "Sarah, you can't do this," Mr. Walker protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Numbers danced in his head: the debt, the loans, the reputation. "I can, and I will." Sarah began to take off her bridesmaid dress. "Emily and I are practically the same height, and with the veil covering my face, no one will notice the difference until it's too late." 30 minutes later, Sarah walked down the aisle of the church, each step echoing like a funeral drum in her ears. The French lace veil partially obscured her vision, but she could feel the curious gazes of the guests, heard the murmurs about the delay. At the altar, Lucas waited impatiently, nervously adjusting his tie. Beside him, Ethan watched the approaching figure, and something stirred within him. There was something different in the bearing of that woman, in the way she walked, more restrained, more dignified than the exuberant Emily he knew. When Sarah finally reached the altar, Ethan could see through the veil the brown eyes he knew so well. Not Emily's vibrant blues, but the deep, melancholic eyes of Sarah, the sister who had always remained in the shadows of family parties and dinners, but whose presence he had always noticed. The shock hit him like a lightning bolt. Ethan had known Sarah for years. He had always observed her discreetly during social events, admiring her quiet grace, her subtle intelligence. Unlike the women in his social circle, Sarah had never tried to impress him or win him over. Perhaps that's why she intrigued him so much. "Lucas," Ethan whispered urgently to his friend. "That's not—" "Quiet," Lucas muttered back, not taking his eyes off the priest who was beginning the ceremony. "Whatever happened with the delay, let's just get this over with." Ethan felt a revolt growing in his chest. Lucas hadn't noticed the substitution, and that revealed exactly the kind of man he was, too superficial to truly know the woman he intended to marry. Throughout the ceremony, Ethan couldn't take his eyes off Sarah. He saw the tension in her shoulders, the almost imperceptible tremor of her hands, the way she kept her head down. Knowing her as he did, he could imagine the sacrifice this represented for her. When the moment came for the vows, Sarah raised her face slightly, and her eyes met Ethan's for a fraction of a second. In that moment, he saw everything: the pain, the fear, the resignation, and something else that made him gasp. A silent plea. "Lucas Montgomery, The priest's voice echoed through the church. "Do you take Emily Walker to be your wife, to love and respect her, in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Sarah closed her eyes, preparing to hear the answer that would seal her fate. "I do," Lucas responded automatically, without hesitation. "And you, Emily Walker—" "Stop!" Ethan's deep and authoritative voice cut through the air like a knife. A shocked murmur ran through the church. Lucas turned to his friend with wide eyes. "Ethan, what the hell You don't even know who you're marrying," Ethan said, his voice echoing through the church in absolute silence. He took a step forward, facing the astonished looks of 200 people. "That's not Emily." Sarah felt her legs weaken. Her heart beat so hard that she was sure everyone could hear it. "What are you talking about?" Lucas asked, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. Ethan approached Sarah and with a gentle gesture lifted the veil that covered her face. Sarah's light brown hair fell over her shoulders and her brown eyes, brimming with tears, met his. "Sarah," he said softly, and her name on his lips sounded like a caress. The church exploded in murmurs. Camera flashes began to go off. Mrs. Walker brought her hand to her chest, feigning surprise. Lucas took a step back, finally understanding the magnitude of what was happening. "Sarah, Ethan hesitated, knowing that the next words would change everything forever. "I can't let you sacrifice yourself like this." "Ethan, please," Sarah whispered, tears rolling down her face. "You don't understand my family." "I understand more than you imagine," he replied, and then, in front of all the guests, the cameras, the New York City society, Ethan Caldwell did something he never thought he would have the courage to do. He knelt before her. "Sarah Walker," his voice was hoarse with emotion, "will you take me to be your husband?" The silence in the church was deafening. Sarah looked at him incredulously, torn between shock, gratitude, and something more dangerous, a hope she hadn't dared to nurture in years of secret admiration for Lucas's friend. "Ethan, you can't be serious," she murmured. "I've never been more serious in my life," he replied, rising and taking her hands. "Marry me, Sarah. Now, here, in front of everyone. Let me protect you." Lucas was still in shock, processing the betrayal of his best friend. The guests whispered frantically. The cameras didn't stop flashing. And Sarah, in the center of all that storm, realized that her answer would determine not only her destiny, but that of everyone present. "Yes," Sarah whispered, her voice almost inaudible, but Ethan heard. The relief that passed over his face was so intense that she almost forgot where they were. The priest, an experienced man who had witnessed many unusual situations in his 40 years of ministry, quickly adapted to the situation. "Then, Ethan Caldwell, do you take Sarah Walker to be your wife?" "I do," Ethan replied firmly, his eyes never leaving Sarah's. The ceremony that followed was a blur for Sarah. The priest's words, the incessant flashes of the cameras, the scandalized murmurs of the guests, everything mixed together in a surreal cacophony. When Ethan slid the ring that should have been Emily's on her finger, she felt as if she were watching someone else's life. "You may kiss the bride," the priest announced, and Sarah felt the world stop. Ethan approached slowly, his hands gently touching her face. "I'm sorry," he murmured softly, just for her to hear, before pressing his lips against hers in a chaste kiss, but one that sent waves of heat throughout Sarah's body. 2 hours later, Sarah found herself in Ethan's penthouse overlooking Central Park South, still wearing her wedding dress, watching New York City stretch out endlessly through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The mansion, because that's what this place was, left her intimidated. Each piece of furniture probably cost more than she earned in a year. "Sarah," Ethan appeared behind her, having changed his tuxedo for a white shirt and dress pants. "Are you all right?" She turned, still processing everything. "I just married you," she said slowly. "I don't even know why you did that." Ethan approached, maintaining a respectful distance. "Because I couldn't bear to see you sacrificing your life for people who don't even value you." "You don't know me," Sarah protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "That's not true," Ethan said softly. "I've watched you for years, Sarah. At the Montgomery family dinners, at charity galas, at social events, I've always noticed how you took care of everyone, how you remained in the shadows so that Emily could shine. You are the most generous woman I know, and also the most underrated." Sarah felt tears burning her eyes. "You don't understand the pressure that my family—" "I understand more than you imagine," Ethan interrupted, and something in his voice changed. "My parents made choices for me for a long time too." He walked to the bar and poured 2 glasses of wine, offering one to her. "My first wife was their choice, Isabella Vanderbilt. You must remember her from the social circuit." Sarah nodded. Isabella had been a constant presence alongside Ethan for about 2 years, a spectacular woman who seemed to have stepped out of the pages of a magazine. "We got married when I was 28, Ethan continued, his gaze lost in the city below. "It was the perfect marriage on paper. 2 powerful families uniting, aligned business interests, social expectations met." What happened?" Sarah asked gently, sensing the pain in his voice. Ethan took a sip of wine before answering. "She was pregnant when we got married. At least, that's what everyone believed." Sarah held her breath, sensing that she was about to hear something that very few people knew. "I found out 3 months after the wedding that the baby wasn't mine." Ethan's voice was controlled, but Sarah could hear the old hurt. "She'd been having an affair with my partner for over a year. The wedding, the pregnancy, it was all a sham to cover up the scandal." "Ethan," Sarah murmured, gently touching his arm. "The baby was stillborn," he continued, and Sarah saw his hands tremble almost imperceptibly. "Isabella had severe depression. I took care of her for months, even knowing about the betrayal, because it was the right thing to do. When she recovered, she asked for a divorce, said she couldn't stand to look at me and be reminded of everything she had lost." Sarah felt her, heartbreaking for him. "That's why you're so skeptical about love." "Was," Ethan corrected her, turning to her, "until this afternoon, when I saw you walking down the aisle of that church, sacrificing your happiness for your family, and I realized that I couldn't stand by and watch it happen." Silence stretched between them, charged with unspoken emotions. Sarah looked at the ring on her finger, the same one that should have been on her sister's finger. "Ethan," she said finally, "do you realize that we are now really married?" "Legally, officially married?" He nodded. "Yes, and I want you to know that I don't expect anything from you. We can keep separate rooms, live as partners, if that's what you want. I won't pressure you." "What if I want more than that?" The words escaped before Sarah could stop them. Ethan's gaze intensified. "Sarah, I've watched you too, you know," she admitted, blushing. "During all these years, I always wondered what it would be like if you noticed me, not just as Emily's discreet sister, but as a woman." Ethan approached, and Sarah could feel the heat emanating from his body. "I've always noticed you. Why do you think I've never been interested in any of the women my parents tried to introduce me to after the divorce?" Ethan's phone rang at that moment, breaking the tension. He looked at the screen and frowned. "It's Lucas," he said, probably furious. "Answer it," Sarah said. "He's your best friend." Ethan hesitated but answered. Sarah could hear Lucas's angry voice on the other end of the line. "Ethan, What the hell was that at the church? You humiliated me in front of all of New York City. And now I found out where Emily was. She ran off with Robert Manning, that bankrupt playboy. Sarah closed her eyes. Even after everything, officially finding out about Emily's elopement hurt. We need to talk, Lucas continued. You have no idea what you just got yourself into. Sarah's family has huge debts. You married a woman who comes from a bankrupt family, and now everyone will think you're a fool who let himself be fooled. Ethan looked at Sarah, seeing the humiliation spreading across her face as she listened to Lucas's cruel words. Lucas, Ethan said coldly, Sarah is my wife now, and if you ever talk about her like that again, our friendship is over here. He hung up the phone and threw it on the sofa. Sarah, ignore what he said. It's true, she whispered. My family has debts. Emily's wedding was financed with loans. Now you're stuck with me and our financial problems. Look at me. Ethan held her face gently, forcing her to meet his eyes. I married you because I wanted to. The circumstances don't matter. The debts don't matter. It doesn't matter what anyone thinks. But Sarah could see in his eyes that Lucas' words had planted a seed of doubt. And for the first time since saying yes at the altar, she wondered if she had made the biggest mistake of her life. 3 weeks had passed since the wedding, and Sarah still felt like an intruder in her own life. Ethan's penthouse, with its 5,000 square feet and panoramic views, had become a gilded cage. They maintained a respectful courtesy. Breakfast together, silent dinners, polite conversations about the weather. Ethan worked late every day, clearly avoiding the intimacy he had promised not to pressure. Sarah spent her afternoons translating documents on her laptop, feeling useless amidst the luxury that surrounded her. It was on a rainy Thursday that everything changed. Sarah was in the kitchen making coffee when she heard the elevator door open. Ethan was home early, which was unusual, but when she turned to greet him, she saw that he was pale, staggering slightly. Ethan, what happened? It's nothing, he murmured, but his voice was weak. Just a little dizzy. Before he could finish the sentence, his knees buckled. Sarah ran to him, managing to support him partially as he collapsed on the sofa. Ethan! She knelt beside him, touching his forehead. It was burning. You have a high fever. How long have you been feeling like this? A few days, he admitted reluctantly. I thought it was just exhaustion. The meetings for the Amazon project. Amazon? Sarah frowned. What project? Ethan closed his eyes, breathing with difficulty. A sustainable venture, the company's biggest initiative. If it goes wrong, he lost consciousness before finishing the sentence. Sarah didn't hesitate. She called an ambulance and accompanied Ethan to New York Presbyterian Hospital. For the next 6 hours, she remained in the waiting room, refusing to leave even when the nurse told her that only immediate family could stay. I'm his wife, she had said with a firmness that surprised her. The diagnosis came at 2 a.m, severe pneumonia, complicated by extreme exhaustion. The doctor was direct. Ethan had pushed his body beyond its limits, ignoring the symptoms for weeks. He'll be all right, Dr. Ramirez assured, but he'll need complete rest for at least 2 weeks. No work, nothing a tease of stress. Sarah nodded, but knew that convincing Ethan would be impossible. When he woke up the next day, the first thing he saw was Sarah, sleeping in the chair next to the bed, still wearing the same clothes as the day before. Something moved deeply inside his chest, a tenderness he hadn't felt in years. Sarah, he called gently. She woke up instantly, getting up to check if he was all right. How do you feel? Do you need anything? Water? The doctor said. Sarah, he repeated, taking her hand. You stayed here all night. Of course I did, she replied, as if it were obvious. You are my husband. The words were said with simplicity, but carried a weight that they both felt. For the first time since the wedding, they didn't sound like a legal obligation, but like a choice of the heart. "You shouldn't have stayed," Ethan protested weakly. "You must be exhausted." Ethan," Sarah sat on the edge of the bed. "Stop trying to push me away. I chose to be here." During the 2 days he remained hospitalized, Sarah didn't leave his side. She brought books to read to him, organized his meals, kept work visitors, away with a determination that impressed even the nurses. It was on the second night that it happened. Ethan had had feverish nightmares, waking up scared and disoriented. Sarah, who was sleeping on the cot that the hospital had provided, immediately got up. "Hey, you're okay," she murmured, touching his face gently. "Just a nightmare." "Sarah," he whispered, holding her hand against his face, "why are you doing this for me?" "Because I care about you," she replied honestly. "More than I should, considering." "Considering what?" "Considering you married me out of pity." Ethan pulled her gently so that she sat on the edge of the bed. "Sarah, look at me." When she finally raised her eyes, he saw all the insecurities, all the fears that she was trying to hide. "It wasn't pity," he said firmly. "It was love." The words fell between them like a long, repressed confession. "Ethan, I fell in love with you 2 years ago," he continued, as if a dam had broken. "At Lucas's birthday dinner, you were wearing a dark blue dress, and when Emily spilled wine on the table, you immediately started cleaning it up, worrying more about her embarrassment than your own stained dress. It was at that moment that I knew." Sarah felt tears burning her eyes. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" "Because you were always taking care of everyone. I thought it would be selfish to add my feelings to your list of responsibilities." "Idiot," she whispered, and then, without thinking about the consequences, leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't the chaste kiss from the altar. It was a kiss charged with 2 years of repressed desire, of 3 weeks of unresolved tension, of 2 nights of mutual care and concern. When they broke apart, both were breathing unevenly. "Sarah," Ethan murmured against her lips, "if we do, there's no turning back. I can't pretend anymore that this is just a marriage of convenience." "Then don't pretend," she replied, and kissed him again. 2 hours later, Sarah woke up nestled in Ethan's arms in the narrow hospital bed. The reality of what had happened hit her like a cold wave. They had crossed a line from which they could not return. What had begun as a marriage of convenience was now something real, deep, and infinitely more complicated. And outside the room, a night nurse finished a phone call, having been generously paid for information about the hospital's VIP patients. "Yes," she whispered on the phone, "I can confirm. They're definitely not faking it. The marriage is real." On the other end of the line, a satisfied female voice replied, "Perfect. Now we can proceed with the plan." Sarah, still asleep in Ethan's arms, had no idea that her first night of true love had been the exact moment when their lives became the target of a meticulously planned revenge. 2 weeks after Ethan's discharge from the hospital, Sarah finally felt as if she were living a fairy tale. They had found a perfect rhythm: lazy mornings in bed, afternoons working together in the penthouse office, nights discovering each other in ways she had never imagined possible. Ethan had insisted that she stop working as a freelancer, but Sarah had negotiated a compromise. She would become the official translator for his company for international projects. It was a way to maintain her independence while building something together. It was on a Friday morning that the first crack appeared in their bubble of happiness. Sarah was translating contracts for the Amazon project when her phone rang. The number was unknown. "Sarah Caldwell," a soft female voice asked, and Sarah felt a chill hearing her new last name pronounced by a stranger. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Isabella Vanderbilt. I think we need to talk." Sarah's blood ran cold. Ethan's ex-wife. About what? About your sham marriage, Isabella said casually. Meet me at St. Ambrose on Madison Avenue in an hour. Come alone. I'm not going to... Sarah, Isabella's voice turned icy. I have some very interesting photos of you two in the hospital. Photos that clearly show that your marriage of convenience has become something much more intimate. I imagine that neither Ethan nor you would like these images to reach the press, especially considering the billion-dollar project he's negotiating. The call ended, leaving Sarah's hands shaking. An hour later, Sarah found herself sitting across from one of the most beautiful women she had ever seen. Isabella Vanderbilt maintained the icy elegance that Sarah remembered from social events. But now there was something predatory in her blue eyes. You're prettier than I expected, Isabella said, stirring her coffee with languid movements. I understand Ethan's attraction. What do you want? Sarah was direct. Isabella smiled, pulling a tablet from her purse and showing a series of photographs. Sarah immediately recognized the hospital room, she and Ethan embracing in bed. Kisses, intimate caresses. I bribed a nurse to get these photos, Isabella explained casually. People have a price, darling. You should learn that. Why are you doing this? Oh, because Ethan owes me. Isabella's eyes flashed with malice. He left me when I needed him most. Yes, I had an affair. Yes, I lied about the paternity, but the baby I lost, the baby was his. Sarah felt the world spin. What? The first DNA test was wrong, Isabella continued, her voice choked with genuine emotion for the first time. I discovered the truth months after the divorce when I took another test. The baby that died was Ethan's son. My son. Our son. Does he know? No, Isabella smiled cruelly. And he won't know, at least not yet. Sarah stood up to leave, but Isabella grabbed her wrist. Where do you think you're going? I'm not finished. I'm finished listening to this madness. Sit down, Isabella ordered, and there was something so venomous in her voice that Sarah obeyed instinctively. Ethan is negotiating a $3 billion project for sustainable development in the Amazon. International investors, the federal government, the world media are watching. If these photos leak, suggesting that he married you just to satisfy sexual fantasies, that's not true. It doesn't matter if it's true, Isabella laughed. It matters how it will look. A powerful tycoon who takes advantage of a vulnerable woman, turning a fake marriage into his private playground. Investors will flee, the project will be cancelled, and Ethan's reputation will be destroyed. Sarah felt nauseous. What do you want in return? $50 million, Isabella said simply. Transferred to an offshore account. Consider it alimony for the years I lost suffering alone. 50 million? That's impossible. For a man who's worth 2 billion? It's pocket change. Isabella put the tablet back in her purse. You have 48 hours to get the money. If I don't receive the transfer by Sunday at midnight Monday morning, every major magazine in the country will receive these photos, along with a very interesting story about how the Cinderella of New York seduced the city's richest tycoon. Sarah stood up on wobbly legs. What if I tell Ethan everything? Do it, Isabella challenged. Tell him you're being blackmailed because of your intimacy. See how he reacts, knowing that his wife brought this scandal upon the most important deal of his career. That night, Sarah arrived home trying to act normally, but Ethan knew her too well. What happened? He asked as soon as she entered the penthouse. Nothing, she lied, forcing a smile. Just a tiring day. Ethan approached, touching her face tenderly. Sarah, you're trembling. For a moment, she almost gave in, almost told him everything about Isabella, the photos, the blackmail. But then she remembered the ex-wife's words about how he would react. I just need a bath and some rest, she whispered, kissing him lightly before pulling away. But Ethan held her hand. Sarah, whatever it is, we can solve it together. Not everything can be solved with money, Ethan, she replied without thinking. The comment caught them both by surprise. Ethan frowned. Why would you talk about money? Sarah realized her mistake, but it was too late. I didn't talk about money. Yes, you did. Ethan studied her carefully. Sarah, is someone asking you for money? At that moment, Ethan's phone rang. He looked at the screen and his expression changed. It's Isabella, he said, showing the name on the screen. Why would she be calling? Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Isabella had promised 48 hours, but apparently decided to speed up the game. Ethan answered, and Sarah could hear Isabella's silky voice on the other end. Ethan, darling, I hope you and your wife are doing well. I imagine Sarah has already told you about our little chat this afternoon. Ethan's eyes met Sarah's, and she saw the trust they had built begin to crack. What are you talking about, Isabella? Oh, her voice dripped with false surprise. She hasn't told you. How interesting. Well, don't worry. I'm sure she'll tell you everything, eventually. The call ended, leaving a deafening silence between them. Sarah, Ethan's voice was dangerously controlled. What did Isabella mean? And Sarah realized that no matter what she said now, the seeds of distrust had been planted, and Isabella had orchestrated everything perfectly. The fairy tale was over, and the nightmare was just beginning. Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that there was no way to hide the truth anymore. Isabella came to see me today. She has photos of us two in the hospital. Ethan's face closed off instantly. What kind of photos? Intimate, Sarah whispered, feeling her cheeks burn with shame. From when we slept together. The first night. How did she get these photos? A nurse. She paid her to... Sarah swallowed hard. She wants $50 million, or she'll leak everything to the press. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan moved away from her, running his hands through his hair in a gesture that she had already learned to recognize as a sign of extreme stress. 50 million, he repeated slowly. Ethan, I know how this looks, but how this looks. He turned to her, and Sarah saw something die in his eyes. It looks like 3 weeks after marrying me, you're already being used to blackmail me. This isn't my fault, isn't it? His voice was icy now. You didn't find it necessary to tell me that my ex-wife came to see you? You let me answer a call from her without knowing anything. I was going to tell you. When? After she got the money? The accusation hit her like a slap. How can you think that of me? Because I've lived this before. Ethan exploded, his composure finally cracking. A beautiful woman, hasty marriage, and then the complications begin. The blackmails, the secrets, the it's not my fault. I'm not Isabella, aren't you? Then why are you hiding things from me? Ethan's phone rang before Sarah could answer. He looked at the screen and his face paled even more. David Stern, from Vanity Fair, he said, showing her the name. He's probably already received the photos, he answered with a controlled voice. David. Sarah could hear the journalist's lively voice on the other end. Ethan, my friend, what an interesting story came to me today. Photos of you with your wife in some very intimate situations. In the hospital, isn't it? Right after that dramatic wedding that all of New York City is still talking about. David, any material you have was obtained illegally. Maybe, but it's in the public interest, don't you think? The tycoon who married on impulse in the church, saving the damsel in distress. And then, well, the photos speak for themselves. Ethan hung up and immediately called his lawyer. Sarah heard only fragments of the conversation. Preliminary injunction, invasion of privacy, sue for defamation. When he finished, his face was grim. Mr. Thompson said he can try for a restraining order, but if the photos are already circulating in newsrooms, it's unlikely that we can prevent the publication. At that moment, Helena's phone rang. It was her mother. "Sarah!" Mrs. Walker's hysterical voice echoed through the apartment. "A reporter just called here, asking about you and Ethan. Said they have photos of you two in the hospital. What's going on?" Sarah closed her eyes, feeling her life crumble. "Mom, I'll explain later." "Later." "Sarah, your father almost had a heart attack. Intimate photos, in the hospital. What kind of woman have you become?" The call was cut off, leaving Sarah in tears. "My family," she whispered. "Your family," Ethan repeated, and there was bitterness in his voice. "What an interesting coincidence. First Emily runs away, leaving you at the altar, now this. Your family has a special talent for creating scandals. Don't blame my family for this. Why not? If you hadn't married me out of desperation, none of this would be happening." The words came out like stabs, and Sarah felt something break definitively inside her chest. "Out of desperation," she repeated, her voice trembling. "Is that what you really think?" Ethan stopped, realizing what he had said, but it was too late. "Sarah." "No," she raised her hand, preventing him from approaching. "You've made it very clear what you think of me. A desperate opportunist who married you for convenience and is now causing problems." "I didn't say that." "Yes, you did." Tears ran freely down her face now. "And maybe you're right. Maybe I am exactly that." At that moment, the elevator opened, and a man in a suit entered without ceremony. It was Michael, Ethan's personal assistant. "Ethan," he said urgently, "we need to talk. The Amazon project." "Not now, Michael." "Yes, now," Michael insisted. "The German investors just called. They heard rumors about an imminent scandal and are reconsidering the investment. If those photos come out tomorrow—" $3 billion, Ethan murmured, running his hands over his face. Sarah felt the final reality of the situation hit her. It wasn't just about them two, it was about hundreds of jobs, about environmental projects, about a reputation built over decades. "I'm leaving," she said softly. "Sarah, don't." "No, Ethan, Michael is right. If I'm not here, if we assume that the wedding was a mistake, maybe—" "It won't work," Michael interrupted brutally. "The damage is already done. The photos clearly show that you developed a real relationship. The narrative now is that you lied to everyone, pretending it was just convenience." Ethan's phone rang again. This time it was Lucas. "Ethan, man, the whole city is talking. Isabella is spreading that you and Sarah faked the marriage of convenience to hide an affair, that you'd known each other for years and orchestrated everything, including Emily's elopement. That's a lie." "I know it's a lie, but her version is gaining strength. She has details, Ethan, about how you always noticed Sarah, about supposedly secret encounters." It's sounding convincing. When the call ended, Sarah was already packing her things. "Where are you going?" Ethan asked. "To my parents' house, at least until this storm passes." "Sarah, if you leave now, it will look like it's true. That you used me and are now running away. And if I stay, I'll destroy your life," she replied, stuffing clothes into a suitcase. $3 billion, Ethan. Hundreds of jobs. I can't carry that responsibility. "Don't leave me," he whispered, and for the first time since accusing her, his voice broke. Sarah stopped, her hands trembling over the suitcase. "You yourself said it was desperation." "I was scared, and I'm scared now." She turned to him, tears streaming down her face. "Scared that, deep down, you'll always wonder if I married you for money. Scared that every crisis will make us come back to this same discussion." She closed the suitcase and headed to the elevator. "Sarah, please. If you really love me," she said without turning around, "let me go. Maybe that way you can save everything that really matters." The elevator doors closed, and Ethan was left alone in the penthouse that, just a few hours before, had been their paradise. Across town, Isabella Vanderbilt smiled as she read the first news online about the scandal. Everything was going exactly as planned, but she hadn't played her most devastating card yet, the truth about the baby who died. That revelation she would save for the perfect moment when both Ethan and Sarah were completely destroyed and vulnerable. Revenge, after all, was a dish best served cold. Sarah spent 3 days at her parents' house in Greenwich Village, watching her life crumble on television and social media. The headlines were cruel. Cinderella or opportunist? The modern day gold digger. Tycoon falls into love trap. The photos from the hospital were everywhere, pixelated but clearly recognizable. Worse yet, Isabella had given exclusive interviews, painting a devastating picture. Sarah as a manipulator who took advantage of Ethan's kindness, even orchestrating her sister's elopement to get married to the richest man in New York. Sarah? Mr. Walker entered the room where she had been hiding for days. There's a young woman here who wants to talk to you. Says it's important. Sarah sighed, expecting another journalist. But when she went downstairs, she found a young woman, simply dressed, looking nervous. Sorry to bother you, the woman said. My name is Carol Smith. I used to be a nurse at New York Presbyterian. Used to be. Sarah felt her heart race. You? I took the photos, Carol admitted, her hands trembling. But it wasn't for the money. Well, not only for the money. Isabella threatened me. What do you mean? Carol looked around nervously before continuing. My daughter Sophia has leukemia. She's been hospitalized for 6 months. Isabella found out about our financial situation and approached me. Said she would pay for all of Sophia's treatment if I got the photos. Sarah felt a mixture of anger and compassion. And you accepted? My daughter was dying. Carol burst into tears. Isabella said it was just to have something against Ethan, to force him to talk to her. I didn't know she was going to use the photos like that. Why are you telling me this now? Carol wiped her eyes. Because Sophia died yesterday. Silence weighed between them. Sarah touched the woman's shoulder, feeling her pain. Isabella didn't pay a cent of the treatment, Carol continued bitterly. Said our part of the deal was done when I delivered the photos. Now my daughter is dead, I lost my job, and you two are suffering because of my greed. Carol, Sarah began, but the nurse interrupted her. There's more. Isabella didn't stop there. Carol pulled a small recorder from her pocket. She called me yesterday, drunk, celebrating. I recorded the conversation. Sarah took the device with trembling hands and pressed play. Isabella's slurred voice echoed clearly. Carol, my dear, you have no idea how perfectly everything turned out. Ethan is destroyed. That cow Sarah is in hiding. And the best part, he still doesn't know about Daniel. Daniel? Carol's voice asked on the recording. My dead son. The baby wasn't from another man, Carol. He was Ethan's. The first DNA test was wrong, but I never told him. I let him believe the lie because I was furious. Now he's going to suffer like I suffered. Sarah felt her blood run cold. She lied about the paternity. There's more, Carol said, fast-forwarding the recording. The Amazon project will sink along with his reputation. 3 billion lost because of pride. And when he's completely broken, I'm going to tell him about Daniel. I'll say that he abandoned his own son because he was a coward who couldn't forgive a desperate woman. The recording ended with Isabella's cruel laughter. Sarah stood up abruptly. I need to take this to Ethan. He'll sue me for invasion of privacy, Carol murmured. No, Sarah took the woman's hands. You were a victim as much as we were. Isabella manipulated your desperation. An hour later, Sarah was in the elevator of Ethan's penthouse, her heart beating erratically. When the doors Opened, she found him in the office, surrounded by papers, looking terrible. "Sarah," he stood up, surprised. "What are you—" "You need to hear this," she said, holding out the recorder. Ethan listened to the recording in silence, his face growing paler with each word. When it was over, he stood motionless for long minutes. "Daniel," he whispered finally, "my son." "Ethan, she lied about everything, the betrayal, the paternity, and she let me believe that I had lost a son who wasn't even mine." Ethan's voice was broken, and all this time, it was my son who had died. Sarah approached, touching his arm. "I'm so sorry." 2 years, he continued as if talking to himself. 2 years I carried the guilt of having been betrayed, of having been an idiot. And all this time, "Ethan, look at me." Sarah held his face. "Isabella destroyed you both with lies. You can't let her continue controlling your life." "Our marriage," he began. "Our marriage started for all the wrong reasons," Sarah interrupted him. "But it developed for all the right reasons. And I'm not going to let her lies destroy what we've built." At that moment, Ethan's phone rang. It was Michael. "Ethan, we have a problem. Isabella just gave a press conference. She's claiming that you knew about the paternity of the baby and abandoned her anyway. Says she has documents proving it." Sarah and Ethan looked at each other, realizing that Isabella had anticipated their movements. She was playing all the cards at the same time, creating a smoke screen of lies so dense that it would be impossible to distinguish the truth. "The German investors have officially cancelled," Michael continued. "And there's more. The district attorney is opening an investigation based on her allegations. They want to examine all the contracts for the Amazon project." When the call ended, Sarah saw the complete devastation on Ethan's face. "3 billion, he murmured. 1,200 direct jobs, 5 years of work. "We're going to fight," Sarah said with determination. "Isabella may have lied about everything, but we have the truth." "The truth?" Ethan laughed bitterly. "The truth is that I fell in love with you before you were even free to love me. The truth is that our marriage happened in circumstances that seemed suspicious to anyone. The truth is that I should have investigated better about Daniel." "The truth," Sarah said firmly, "is that Isabella Vanderbilt is a sociopath who destroyed, lives for revenge, and we're going to prove it." She went to the phone and dialed a number. "Mr. Thompson, it's Sarah Caldwell. I need you to put me in contact with the best private investigator in New York City, and I want an emergency meeting with the legal team. We have a war to win." Ethan watched her, seeing a determination that he had never noticed before. The shy and resigned Sarah had disappeared. In her place was a woman who had decided to fight for love and for the truth. "Sarah," he said softly, "if we do this, there's no turning back. Isabella will come with everything. She still has cards to play." "Then let her come," Sarah replied, her eyes shining with a fierce determination. She underestimated the wrong woman. But while Sarah organized her counteroffensive across town, Isabella Vanderbilt smiled as she hung up the phone after a very interesting conversation. "Excellent," she murmured to herself, looking at a folder full of documents. "Sarah wants war? I'll give her a war that will destroy not only her marriage, but her entire family." The final fight was about to begin, and Isabella hadn't shown her most devastating weapon yet. The final battle took place on a Tuesday morning in the ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, transformed into the scene of a press conference that all of New York City awaited. Isabella had summoned the press for what she called final revelations about the Caldwell scandal, promising documents that would definitively prove her version of events. Sarah arrived accompanied by Mr. Thompson and a team of 3 lawyers, as well as the private investigator she had hired, a former NYPD detective named Robert Mendez. In 48 hours of intense work, they had assembled a devastating dossier on Isabella, Ethan entered a few minutes later, pale but determined. His eyes met Sarah's across the crowded room, and she saw in them the same resolution that she felt burning in her chest. "Ladies and gentlemen," Isabella began, radiant in a white dress that seemed mockingly bridal, "I came here today to reveal the complete truth about Ethan Caldwell and his so-called wife." She opened a folder and removed the first document. "Here, we have proof that Sarah Walker investigated Ethan's financial situation months before her sister's wedding. She knew exactly who he was and how much he was worth." Murmurs ran through the ballroom. Sarah felt her stomach tighten, but Mr. Thompson touched her arm reassuringly. "Furthermore," Isabella continued, "I have here recorded conversations between Sarah and Emily where they planned the whole marriage charade. Emily didn't run away for love. She was paid by Sarah to disappear and make way for the plan." The lie was so absurd that Sarah almost laughed, but she saw some journalists taking notes frantically. And finally, Isabella held up a document as if it were a weapon. "I have here the DNA test of my son Daniel, proving definitively that Ethan Caldwell is the father of the child he abandoned to die." The silence in the ballroom was deafening. "Any questions?" Isabella smiled triumphantly. Sarah stood up. "I have one." "Ah, the protagonist appears." Isabella laughed. "Tell me, Sarah, how does it feel to be unmasked?" "Actually," Sarah walked to the front of the ballroom, "I wanted to know how it feels to be a murderer." The ballroom exploded. Isabella paled. "How dare you?" "Sophia Smith," Sarah said clearly, "a 6-year-old girl who died of leukemia because you lied to her mother, promising to pay for treatment in exchange for intimate photos taken illegally in the hospital." Sarah nodded to Carol, who entered the ballroom accompanied by Robert Mendez. "This is Carol Smith, the nurse you coerced. She has recordings of you confessing that you lied about the paternity of baby Daniel." "That's inadmissible in court," Isabella began, but her voice was trembling now. "Maybe," Robert Mendez approached the microphone, "but this is admissible." He placed a second recorder on the table. "Isabella Vanderbilt, this recording was made last night, with a court order, during a phone conversation with Dr. Mark Andrews." Isabella's voice echoed clearly through the sound system. "Mark, you need to confirm that the DNA test you did 5 years ago was wrong. I'll pay you $2 million to publicly admit that you made a mistake." A man's voice responded, "Isabella, that's bribery. Besides, the test wasn't wrong. The baby really wasn't Ethan's. Then falsify a new test. I need him to believe that Daniel was his son." The ballroom was in absolute shock. Isabella tried to grab the recorder, but Robert Mendez stopped her. "There's more," he said. "Isabella, are you still on the line?" "Mark, listen carefully. If you don't do what I'm asking, I'm going to tell your wife about us too. And to the medical board about how you falsified other tests for me in the past." The recording continued with devastating details about a network of corruption that Isabella had built over the years, involving doctors, nurses, and even journalists. When the recording ended, Isabella was visibly undone. "Lies," she screamed, "all set up." "Like the documents you presented here?" Sarah asked calmly. "Our investigator discovered that you paid a forger to create these recorded conversations between me and Emily." Mr. Thompson stood up. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have here the complete confession of Isabella Vanderbilt about a conspiracy involving blackmail, extortion, forgery, and coercion of vulnerable people. The district attorney has already been notified." At that moment, 2 police officers entered the ballroom. "Isabella Vanderbilt," one of them announced, "you are under arrest for extortion, forgery, and coercion." As Isabella was led away in handcuffs, screaming incoherent accusations, Sarah finally breathed. Ethan approached her and, in front of all the press present, took her hands. "Sarah," he said, his voice echoing through the microphone that was still on, "I'm sorry. for doubting you, for letting the fear of the past contaminate our present. Ethan, she began, but he continued. You fought for us when I gave up. You proved that our love is worth more than any project, any money, any reputation. Tears streamed down Sarah's face, and you taught me that I deserve to be loved, not just tolerated. Marry me again, Ethan said suddenly. For real this time. No drama, no pressure, just us two and our choice. Sarah laughed through the tears. We're already married, remember? Then let me make the request I should have made 2 years ago. Ethan knelt down right there in front of 200 astonished journalists. Sarah Walker Caldwell, will you continue to be my wife? Forever this time? Forever, she replied. And when he kissed her, the camera flashes captured not a scandal, but a love story that overcame all adversity. 6 months later, the Amazon E project was resumed with new international investors, impressed with the integrity demonstrated by the couple during the crisis. Sarah had become director of social responsibility for the company, using her experience to identify and support families in vulnerable situations. Carol Smith found a new job at the hospital that Sarah helped build in the outskirts of New York City in memory of her daughter Sophia, and Emily, who returned from her European honeymoon with Robert Manning, apologized to her sister and became one of the biggest advocates for Sarah and Ethan's relationship. Isabella was sentenced to 8 years in prison. In her cell, she still keeps clippings from the newspapers that reported on Sarah and Ethan's religious wedding, a simple ceremony just for family, where they could finally celebrate a love built on truth, trust, and choice. Some mornings, Sarah still wakes up in the penthouse overlooking Central Park, thinking she's dreaming. But then Ethan kisses her, whispers, "Good morning, my wife," in her ear. And she remembers that the best fairy tales are those built by two, people brave enough to fight for true love. And when she looks out the window at New York City, stretching out endlessly below them, Sarah smiles. After all, some stories really do end with "and they lived happily ever after," especially those where love chooses to fight against all odds.